Martha Collins stood at the edge of her small ranch and watched the twin suns of New Arizona sink below the red horizon. The wind carried the smell of dust and metal from the mining operations 20 miles south, where the big corporations dug deep into the planet's crust, looking for rare minerals. She pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders as the temperature began to drop. Night came fast on this world, and with it came dangers that most Earthborn humans never imagined. Behind her, the biomechanical creature she called Belle stamped its hooves against the hard ground. Belle was a hover horse, one of the few working animals that could survive on New Arizona. Half flesh and half machine, Belle had the intelligence of a horse from old Earth, but with enhanced strength and the ability to float 6 inches above the ground when needed. The hover horses had been created by the first colonists 50 years ago when they realized that normal Earth animals could not handle the harsh environment and the strange gravity of this frontier. World at Martha's ranch house was small but solid, built from local stone and reinforced with metal plates that could withstand the fierce storms that rolled across the plains every few months. Solar panels on the roof collected energy during the day, while underground water tanks stored the precious liquid that fell during the brief rainy season. Everything on New Arizona had to be planned and built to last because getting supplies from Earth took 2 years and cost more money than most colonists would ever see. Her son Jake emerged from the barn where he had been feeding their small herd of bio-chickens. At 17, Jake was tall and lean like his father had been, with the same green eyes that seemed to see everything. He had been born on New Arizona and knew no other home. To him, the red sky and the strange calls of the crystal birds at night were normal. He could read the weather patterns and knew which areas to avoid when the chrome wolves were hunting. "Belle looks restless tonight," Jake said as he walked up to stand beside his mother. The hover horse was indeed moving back and forth near the fence, her mechanical parts glowing softly in the growing darkness. "She knows something we don't," Martha replied. Belle had saved their lives more than once by sensing danger before humans could detect it. The hover horses had been designed with enhanced senses that could pick up electromagnetic fields and chemical changes in the air. "Maybe we should bring her into the barn tonight." The settlement of Haven was visible in the distance, its lights twinkling like stars against the dark landscape. 3,000 people lived there, most of them working in the mines or the small factories that processed the raw materials. Haven had grown slowly over the past 20 years as more families arrived from Earth looking for a new start. The colony had everything a frontier town needed, including a medical clinic, a school, a communication center that could send messages back to Earth, and a small security force to protect against the various threats that lived on New Arizona. Martha had arrived on New Arizona 15 years ago with her husband Danny and baby Jake. Danny had been a mining engineer who believed that the frontier worlds offered opportunities that Earth could no longer provide. He had been right about that, but he had also underestimated how dangerous life could be so far from civilization. 3 years ago, Danny had died defending the ranch from a pack of chrome wolves that had been driven from their territory by mining operations. The chrome wolves were silicon-based predators that looked like metal dogs but moved with the speed and intelligence of Earth wolves. Their bite could tear through most protective clothing, and their pack-hunting behavior made them extremely dangerous. After Danny's death, many people had told Martha that she should sell the ranch and move into town where it was safer. A widow with a teenage son had no business trying to run a homestead on the dangerous frontier, but Martha had refused to give up the life that she and Danny had built together. The ranch was small, but it was profitable. She raised bio-chickens for their eggs and meat, grew hearty vegetables in her greenhouse, and used Belle to transport goods between the outlying farms and the main settlement. Belle was worth more than everything else Martha owned combined. A good hover horse could cost as much as a small house back on Earth. Belle was not just transportation, but also a partner in the daily work of running the ranch. She could carry heavy loads, detect underground water sources, and even help with the medical care of other animals. Most importantly, Belle could outrun almost any predator on New Arizona, and her enhanced senses made her an early warning system against danger. The sound of an approaching vehicle made both Martha and Jake turn toward the road. A security patrol from Haven was driving slowly along the perimeter fence, their lights sweeping back and forth across the landscape. The patrols had increased recently due to reports of strange activities in the outer territories. Some ranchers claimed to have seen unidentified aircraft flying at night, while others reported finding unusual tracks near their water sources. Martha waved at the patrol vehicle and received a brief flash of lights in response. Security Chief Paul Henderson ran a tight operation, and his people were well trained, but they were only human. New Arizona was a big planet with many unexplored regions, and the security force was small. Each ranch family was essentially on their own when trouble came calling. As the patrol vehicle disappeared into the distance, Martha felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She was not just responsible for her own survival and that of her son, but also for Belle and the other animals that depended on her. The ranch was their home and their livelihood, but it was also their fortress against a world that did not care whether they lived or died. The first stars were becoming visible in the clear sky above them. New Arizona had no moon, but the stars were brighter here than they had ever been on Earth due to the thinner atmosphere. Jake had learned to navigate by the stars and could tell time by the position of the brightest constellation. These were skills that few Earth children ever needed to learn, but they were essential knowledge for anyone who wanted to survive on the frontier. "Come on," Martha said finally. "Let's get Belle settled for the night and then we can have dinner." They walked toward the barn together, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Belle followed them willingly, her mechanical parts humming softly as she moved. Inside the barn, the other animals were already settling down for the night. The bio chickens roosted on their perches while the two bio goats chewed contentedly on their evening feed. Martha gave Belle a final check, running her hands along the smooth metal components that were integrated with the animal's natural muscle and bone. Everything seemed normal, but Belle's ears were still moving constantly, listening for sounds that human ears could not detect. Whatever had made her restless was still out there in the darkness beyond the ranch boundaries. As they walked back to the house, Martha looked once more at the lights of Haven in the distance. Tomorrow she would need to make the monthly supply run to town, loading Belle with goods to trade and bringing back the things they could not produce on the ranch. It was a routine trip that she had made dozens of times, but on New Arizona, routine could become dangerous without warning. She said a silent prayer that tomorrow would be just another ordinary day on the frontier. The morning sun was just breaking over the eastern hills when Martha loaded the last container of bio-chicken eggs onto Belle's cargo harness. The hover horse stood patiently as Martha secured the straps and checked the balance of the load. Today's trip to Haven would bring much-needed credits from the sale of eggs, vegetables, and the special herbs that grew wild on her property, but were valued by the settlement's medical clinic. Jake helped her make the final preparations, his young hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this work many times before. "You sure you don't want me to come with you today?" he asked as he handed her the last supply bag. "Someone needs to stay here and watch the ranch," Martha replied, though they both knew that Jake was capable of making the trip alone if necessary. At 17, he was already more skilled at handling Belle than many adult riders. But Martha preferred to keep him close to home when possible. The frontier was dangerous enough without splitting up the family, unnecessarily. The ride to Haven normally took 2 hours through the rocky canyon that provided the safest route between the ranch and the settlement. Belle moved smoothly along the worn path, her hooves making soft clicking sounds against the stone while her mechanical components hummed quietly. The hover horse could sense changes in the terrain and automatically adjusted her gait to provide the smoothest possible ride for her cargo. Martha had made this journey so many times that she could navigate it with her eyes closed. The path wound between tall red cliffs that provided shelter from the wind and protection from the worst of the planet's weather. Ancient water erosion had carved smooth channels in the rock that made natural highways for travelers. The early colonists had been smart to choose this route when they first established trade connections between the outlying ranches and the main settlement. About halfway to town, Belle suddenly stopped and raised her head, her enhanced ears swiveling to catch sounds that Martha could not hear. The hover horse's mechanical components began glowing more brightly, indicating that her enhanced senses had detected something unusual. Martha immediately became alert and reached for the emergency communicator that she always carried during trips away from the ranch. "What is it, girl?" Martha asked softly, running her hand along Belle's neck to calm the animal. Belle's training included protection protocols that would activate if she sensed immediate danger, but this behavior was different. The hover horse seemed curious rather than afraid. Belle began moving forward again, but more slowly and with obvious caution. They rounded a bend in the canyon and Martha saw what had caught the animal's attention. About 100 yards ahead, something was lying on the ground near the base of the cliff wall. At first, Martha thought it might be debris from one of the mining operations or perhaps equipment that had fallen from a transport vehicle. As they got closer, Martha realized that the object was moving. Belle stopped again when they were about 50 feet away and refused to go any farther despite Martha's gentle urging. The hover horse's protective instincts were clearly engaged, but she showed no signs of the aggressive behavior that would indicate the presence of chrome wolves or other known predators. Martha dismounted and approached on foot, keeping Belle's reins in her hand so she could retreat quickly if necessary. What she found made her gasp in surprise and concern. The figure on the ground was clearly alive, but just as clearly not human. The being was roughly humanoid in shape, but taller and more slender than any person Martha had ever seen. Its skin had a bronze coloration, with intricate geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living tattoos. The creature's clothing was made from materials that Martha did not recognize, fabrics that seemed to shimmer with their own internal light. Most alarming was the obvious fact that the being was seriously injured. Dark fluid that might have been blood seeped from several wounds, while the creature's breathing was labored and irregular. Martha had heard stories about other intelligent species that lived on New Arizona, but she had never seen one in person. The early colonists had reported contact with various alien groups, but those encounters had been rare and usually brief. Most of the non-human species seemed to avoid the human settlements, preferring to remain in the unexplored regions of the planet. The injured being's eyes opened as Martha approached, and she found herself looking into pupils that were larger and darker than human eyes, but unmistakably intelligent. The creature tried to speak, but the sounds that emerged were unlike any language Martha had ever heard. The words had a musical quality with complex tonal variations that human vocal cords could never produce. Martha knelt beside the injured alien and tried to assess the extent of its wounds. She had basic medical training that all frontier colonists received, but she had no idea whether human first aid techniques would be appropriate for a non-human physiology. The creature's injuries appeared to be a combination of cuts and what might have been burns or some other form of energy damage. "I want to help you," Martha said slowly, hoping that her tone would communicate her peaceful intentions even if the words were not understood. The alien watched her with those large dark eyes but made no attempt to move away or defend itself. Martha returned to Belle and retrieved the emergency medical kit that she always carried during trips away from the ranch. The kit contained basic supplies including bandages, antiseptic, and pain medication that might help stabilize the injured being until she could get it to proper medical care. She also activated her emergency communicator and sent a message to the security station in Haven requesting medical assistance. When she returned to the alien's side, Martha found that the being had managed to sit up and was now watching her movements with obvious interest. The creature reached into its clothing and produced a small device that began making soft beeping sounds. After a moment, the device spoke in accented but clearly understandable English. "Thank you for your kindness, human," the device said, translating the alien's musical language into words that Martha could understand. "I am called Ayana of the Traveling People. I am honored by your concern for my welfare." Martha felt a mixture of relief and amazement at being able to communicate with the alien. "I'm Martha Collins. You're badly hurt. I've called for medical help, but it will take time for them to reach us here. Can you tell me what happened to you?" Ayana's response came through the translation device after a brief delay. "I was traveling alone when I encountered hostile machines. The devices were not of human origin, but they showed no mercy to one who posed no threat. I managed to escape, but my injuries are severe." The description of hostile machines worried Martha because it suggested that there might be other dangers in the area. She looked around the canyon but saw no signs of pursuit or immediate threat. Belle remained calm but alert, her enhanced senses monitoring their surroundings for any changes. "The medical team from Haven will be here soon," Martha said, as she began carefully cleaning some of Ayana's wounds with supplies from her kit. The alien's physiology was different from human anatomy, but the basic principles of wound care seemed to apply. "They'll be able to help you much better than I can." Ayana spoke again, and the translator conveyed a sense of gratitude mixed with something that might have been resignation. "You show great kindness to one who is not of your kind.
This is a rare quality among the peoples of the stars.
I fear, however, that my injuries are beyond the ability of medicine to heal. The machines that attacked me carried weapons designed to cause damage that cannot be repaired. Martha felt a chill as she realized what Ayana was trying to tell her. The alien believed that he was dying, and that no amount of medical care would be able to save him. Looking at the extent of his injuries and the strange energy burns that covered parts of his body, Martha began to fear that he might be right. "Don't give up hope," Martha said as she continued working on the wounds. "Human medicine has advanced a lot in recent years, and our doctor in Haven has experience treating different types of injuries. You might be surprised by what can be accomplished." The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the canyon as the medical team from Haven finally arrived. Martha waved to signal their location while Ayana watched the approaching humans with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The emergency response team included Dr. Lisa Morgan, the settlement's chief medical officer, along with 2 paramedics and a security escort. Dr. Morgan took charge of the situation with the calm efficiency that had made her invaluable to the frontier community. She quickly assessed Ayana's condition while asking Martha for details about how she had found the injured alien. The paramedics began setting up emergency medical equipment, while the security team established a perimeter around the area. "This is definitely not human physiology," Dr. Morgan said as she examined Ayana's wounds. "But the basic principles are similar enough that we should be able to help. We need to get him back to the clinic immediately, where I can use the full range of medical equipment." As the medical team prepared to transport Ayana to Haven, the alien spoke once more through his translation device. "Martha Collins of the humans, you have shown great honor in offering aid to a stranger. This kindness will be remembered by my people for as long as the stars shine in the darkness." The medical clinic in Haven was not designed to handle non-human patients, but Dr. Lisa Morgan was doing her best to adapt. Ayana lay on the main examination table while various monitors attempted to track his vital signs. The readings were inconsistent and often confusing because the equipment was calibrated for human physiology. Despite this challenge, Dr. Morgan had managed to stabilize some of Ayana's wounds and provide pain relief that seemed to be effective across species barriers. Martha sat in the waiting area with Jake, who had ridden into town as soon as he received her message about the injured alien. Word of Ayana's arrival had spread quickly through the settlement, and a small crowd had gathered outside the clinic. Most of the colonists had never seen a living alien before, and reactions ranged from curiosity to suspicion to outright fear. Security Chief Paul Henderson paced back and forth in front of the clinic entrance, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Paul was a good man and an effective leader, but he was also responsible for the safety of 3,000 human colonists. The arrival of an injured alien raised questions about what other non-human activities might be occurring in the territories around Haven. "We don't know anything about these people," Paul said to Martha as he paused in his pacing. "We don't know where they come from, what they want, or whether this one is really as harmless as he seems. For all we know, this could be some kind of reconnaissance mission or the beginning of an invasion." Martha understood Paul's concerns, but she had looked into Ayana's eyes and seen pain and gratitude, not deception or hostility. "He was dying when I found him, Paul. Whatever happened to him, he was the victim, not the aggressor. And he had a translation device which suggests that his people have been observing us for some time. If they wanted to attack Haven, they probably would have done it already." Jake nodded in agreement with his mother's assessment. Belle wasn't afraid of him either. She's usually pretty good at sensing danger, and she seemed more curious than threatened. Dr. Morgan emerged from the examination room looking tired and frustrated. She pulled off her surgical gloves and sat down heavily in one of the waiting room chairs. "I've done what I can to treat his injuries, but there are complications that I don't understand. Some of the damage appears to be at the cellular level, possibly caused by some form of energy weapon that I've never encountered before." "Is he going to survive?" Martha asked, though she could see from the doctor's expression that the news was not good. "I honestly don't know," Dr. Morgan replied. "His physiology is similar enough to ours that basic medical care seems to help, but there are aspects of his condition that are completely outside my experience. He's conscious and able to communicate, but he keeps insisting that his injuries are fatal. He says that his people have a term for this type of damage, and that there is no cure." Paul Henderson leaned forward in his chair. Has he said anything about where he comes from or why he was in our territory? He calls his people the Navak and says they are travelers who move across the planet following ancient paths. He was alone when he was attacked by what he describes as mechanical hunters. Based on his description, I think he might have encountered automated defense systems from one of the corporate mining operations. The mention of corporate mining systems made everyone in the room uncomfortable. The big mining corporations that operated on New Arizona used advanced technology that was often dangerous to anyone who got too close. There had been previous incidents where ranchers or prospectors had been injured or killed by automated security systems that were designed to protect valuable mining claims. We should contact the corporate security office and find out if any of their systems malfunctioned recently, Paul said. If their equipment is attacking innocent travelers, we need to know about it. Dr. Morgan shook her head. Ayanna doesn't think the machines were corporate technology. He says they were different from anything his people have seen before. More advanced and more aggressive. He's worried that they might represent a new threat to both humans and Navak. Martha felt a growing sense of urgency as she listened to the conversation. Whatever had attacked Ayanna was still out there and might pose a danger to other travelers or even to the settlement itself. But her immediate concern was for the injured alien who had shown no hostility despite his pain and fear. Can I speak with him? Martha asked. Maybe there's something we can do to help that we haven't thought of yet. Dr. Morgan hesitated. He's very weak and I'm not sure how much longer he'll be conscious. But he's been asking for you specifically. I think your act of helping him has made a strong impression. Martha entered the examination room where Ayanna lay connected to various monitoring devices. The alien's bronze skin had taken on a grayish tinge that suggested his condition was deteriorating, despite the medical care he was receiving. His large dark eyes tracked to Martha as she approached, and he managed a weak gesture toward his translation device. Martha Collins, the device said, interpreting Ayanna's musical speech. You have shown great kindness to one who is far from home. I wish to speak with you about matters of importance while I still have strength. Martha pulled a chair close to the examination table and sat down. What can I do to help you, Ayanna? My people have watched your kind for many seasons, the translation continued. We have seen how you struggle against this world's harsh nature, and how you fight to build homes in the wilderness. Some among my people believe that humans are like the metal diggers, taking from the land without understanding. But you have shown me that there is honor among your people. Ayanna paused to rest, his breathing labored and irregular. When he continued, his words carried a weight that Martha felt in her bones. The machines that attacked me are not from your corporations or from my people. They come from somewhere else, somewhere distant. My people have knowledge of such things, but we are few and scattered. Your people are many and have great skill with technology. Together we might stand against this threat. Destroyers, came the translation. Machines that consume worlds and leave nothing behind but dust and metal. They have found this place and they will not stop until everything living is gone. My people alone cannot fight them. Your people alone cannot fight them, but together there might be hope. The enormity of what Ayanna was suggesting hit Martha like a physical blow. He was talking about some kind of invasion by hostile machines that threatened all life on New Arizona. The idea seemed impossible, but the alien's obvious sincerity and the evidence of his injuries made it hard to dismiss. What would we need to do? Martha asked. How could humans and Navak work together when we barely know each other? Ayanna's response came slowly, as if he was choosing his words carefully. Trust must be earned through actions, not words. Your kindness to a stranger has shown that such trust is possible, but more will be needed. My people have knowledge of this world that your people lack. Your people have tools and weapons that my people do not possess. Martha realized that Ayanna was proposing nothing less than an alliance between species to face a common threat. It was the kind of decision that should be made by leaders and governments, not by a widow rancher sitting in a frontier medical clinic. But sometimes history was shaped by ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary situations. What can I do? Martha asked. I'm just one person with a small ranch. I don't have the authority to speak for all humans. You have something more valuable than authority, the translation device said as Ayanna's eyes began to close. You have compassion. That is the foundation upon which trust must be built. There is something you could do that would show my people that humans are capable of true honor. Ayanna's breathing became more labored, and Martha could see that he was struggling to remain conscious. What do you need me to do? I am dying, Martha Collins. The machines have damaged me in ways that cannot be healed. But if I could return to my people before the end, I could carry word of your kindness and begin the process of building trust between our kinds. I need transportation to reach the hidden valleys where my people gather. Martha felt her heart sink as she realized what Ayanna was asking. The hidden valleys were deep in the unexplored territories, far beyond the range of any normal vehicle. The only way to reach such a remote destination would be with a hover horse capable of traveling across the planet's harsh terrain. Belle is the only transportation I have that could make such a journey, Martha said quietly. But she's also my livelihood. Without her, I can't maintain the ranch or support my family. Ayanna's eyes opened once more and Martha saw understanding there, not accusation or anger. I know what I ask of you, Martha Collins. To give up your most precious possession to help a dying stranger, it is perhaps too much to ask of anyone. Martha sat in silence for a long moment, weighing the impossible choice before her. Belle was worth more than everything else she owned combined. Without the hover horse, she and Jake would probably have to abandon the ranch and move into town where they would be dependent on others for survival. But if Ayanna was right about the threat facing both species, then her personal concerns might seem small compared to the larger picture. Outside the examination room, she could hear Paul H. "What kind of threat are we talking about?" Martha asked, though she was not sure she wanted to hear the answer. Martha stepped outside the medical clinic and found Jake waiting with Belle near the hitching post. The hover horse looked tired from the long day but alert, her mechanical components still glowing softly in the afternoon light. Several colonists had gathered at a respectful distance, their conversations stopping as Martha emerged from the building. "How is he?" Jake asked, reading the troubled expression on his mother's face. "Dying," Martha replied simply. "Dr. Morgan has done everything she can, but the injuries are too severe. He wants to return to his people before the end." Jake nodded slowly, understanding immediately what that meant. The hidden valleys are 3 days' ride into the deep territories. Belle could make the journey, but it would be dangerous. Martha looked at her son and saw the same qualities that had made her fall in love with his father. Danny had always been willing to help others even when it cost him dearly. Jake had inherited that sense of honor along with his father's green eyes and stubborn determination. "There's more to it than that," Martha said quietly. "Ayanna says his people have been watching us and that there's a threat coming that could destroy both humans and Navak. He thinks that helping him could be the first step toward building an alliance between our species." The weight of the decision settled over both of them as they stood beside Belle in the fading afternoon light. Other colonists continued to watch from a distance, but no one approached. Word had spread through Haven about the injured alien, and opinions were divided about what should be done. Some people wanted Ayanna transported to the capital city, where better medical facilities might be able to help him. Others thought he should be turned over to corporate security for questioning about the mechanical attackers. "What do you think we should do?" Jake asked. Martha had been wrestling with the question since she first found Ayanna injured in the canyon. Logic argued that she should let the authorities handle the situation while she focused on protecting her family and their livelihood. But something deeper than logic was pulling her toward a different choice. "Your father used to say that there are moments in life when you have to choose between what's safe and what's right," Martha said. "He said that the people who choose safety usually end up regretting it later." Jake smiled slightly at the mention of his father. "Dad also used to say that Belle was worth more than gold because she represented freedom and independence, and now we have to decide whether that freedom means anything if we don't use it to help others." They were interrupted by the arrival of Paul Henderson, who approached with the careful movements of someone delivering unwelcome news. "Martha, I need to talk with you about the alien. We've been in contact with corporate security, and they want to take custody of him for questioning. They think he might have information about the machines that attacked him." Martha felt a flash of anger at the suggestion. He's barely conscious and he's dying. What kind of questioning do they think they're going to do? "They have medical facilities that might be able to help him better than we can," Paul replied, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe it himself. "And they have experts who understand alien technology and capabilities. They want to interrogate him," Jake said bluntly. "They don't care about helping him recover." Paul's expression showed that Jake had hit close to the truth. "Look, I understand your concerns, but we have to think about the safety of the entire settlement. If there really are hostile machines operating in our territory, we need all the information we can get about them. Martha realized that she was running out of time to make her decision. Once corporate security arrived, Ayana would disappear into their custody and any chance of building trust between humans and Navak would be lost. The dying alien would become a source of information to be extracted, rather than a potential bridge between species. How long before the corporate team gets here? Martha asked. They're flying in from the capital. Should be here by morning. Martha looked at Belle and then at Jake, seeing understanding pass between them without words. They had made their choice, perhaps they had made it the moment Martha first knelt beside the injured alien in the canyon. I'm going to take him home to his people, Martha announced, her voice carrying the quiet determination that had helped her survive 3 years as a frontier widow. Paul stared at her in disbelief. Martha, that's not just dangerous, it's probably illegal. You can't just take custody of an alien being without authorization. I'm not taking custody of him, Martha replied. I'm offering transportation to someone who asked for help. There's no law against that. There's no law against it because nobody ever thought someone would be crazy enough to try it, Paul said with growing frustration. You don't know anything about these Navak people or their territories. You could be riding into a trap or an ambush. Jake stepped forward to stand beside his mother. Ayana was injured by machines, not by his own people. If the Navak wanted to hurt humans, they could have done it long before now. They've been watching us for years without making any hostile moves. Dr. Morgan emerged from the clinic in time to hear the end of the conversation. Ayana is asking for you again, Martha. His condition is deteriorating rapidly, and I don't think he has much time left. Martha made her decision with the finality of someone who had weighed all the options and chosen the only path that felt right. Get him ready for transport. I'm taking him home. Martha, please reconsider, Paul pleaded. Think about what you're risking. Belle is your livelihood. Without her, you'll lose the ranch. Without her, we'll lose our self-respect, Martha replied. Some things are more important than property. Dr. Morgan looked between Martha and Paul, clearly torn between her medical oath to help her patient and her responsibility to the settlement. If you're really going to do this, I'll need to give him medication for the journey and show you how to monitor his condition. He's very weak and the trip could kill him. Staying here will definitely kill him, Martha said. At least this way, he has a chance to die among his own people. The preparations took nearly an hour as Dr. Morgan gathered medical supplies and explained how to care for Ayana during the journey. Belle was fitted with a special harness that would allow the injured alien to ride securely while lying down. Jake helped load supplies including water, food, emergency equipment, and the communication devices that would allow them to stay in contact with Haven for part of the journey. As word spread through the settlement about Martha's plan, more colonists gathered to watch the preparations. Some people thought she was making a noble sacrifice, while others believed she was throwing away her family's future for a stranger. The division in public opinion reflected the broader uncertainty about how humans should relate to the other intelligent species that shared New Arizona. Ayana was carefully transferred from the medical clinic to Belle's specially configured harness. The alien was barely conscious, but he managed to activate his translation device one final time as they prepared to depart. Martha Collins, the device said, conveying Ayana's weak voice. You give up much to help one who is not of your kind. This gift will be remembered by all who hear the story. Your name will be spoken with honor among the Navak for as long as our people travel the hidden paths. Martha adjusted the straps that would keep Ayana secure during the journey and checked the medical monitoring equipment one last time. Just focus on staying alive long enough to reach your people. That's all the thanks I need. Belle seemed to understand the importance of her mission as they finally departed Haven in the last light of the afternoon sun. The hoverhorse moved with unusual care, her enhanced senses monitoring Ayana's condition, while her navigation systems calculated the most efficient route to the deep territories. Jake had wanted to come on the journey, but Martha had insisted that he stay behind to watch the ranch and the animals. It was possible that she would not return and someone needed to be there to maintain their home. If the worst happened, Jake would inherit whatever remained of their life on New Arizona. As Haven disappeared behind them, Martha felt the weight of her decision settling over her like the darkness that was beginning to cover the landscape. She had just committed herself to a 3-day journey into unexplored territory with a dying alien, and no guarantee that she would find the people she was looking for. Belle was strong and capable, but even Hover horses had limits. The first night of the journey would be the most dangerous because they would still be in the outer territories, where chrome wolves and other predators hunted. Martha had camping equipment that would provide some protection, but she would need to rely on Belle's enhanced senses to detect threats before they became deadly. As they rode deeper into the wilderness, Ayanna occasionally whispered something in his musical language that the translation device converted into words of gratitude and encouragement. Despite his pain and weakness, the alien seemed to gain strength from the knowledge that he was finally going home. Martha found herself hoping that his people would understand the significance of her sacrifice, and that it might indeed be the beginning of something larger than any of them could imagine. Martha woke to the sound of Belle's mechanical components humming at a frequency she had never heard before. The hover horse was standing perfectly still beside their small campsite, but every sensor and enhancement was active and glowing brightly in the pre-dawn darkness. Martha immediately checked on Ayanna, who lay unconscious but breathing in the medical transport pod that Dr. Morgan had rigged to Belle's harness. They had been traveling for 2 days through terrain that grew more challenging with each mile. The landscape had changed from the familiar red stone canyons near Haven to a region of twisted rock formations and deep valleys that seemed to exist in a perpetual twilight. Belle's navigation systems indicated they were still heading in the right direction toward the coordinates that Ayanna had provided. But Martha was beginning to wonder if they would reach their destination before the alien's strength finally gave out. The strange humming from Belle's components continued as Martha packed their camping gear and prepared for another day of travel. The hover horse's behavior was unlike anything Martha had experienced in the years since she had acquired the animal. Belle seemed to be responding to something in the environment that was beyond human perception. "What is it, girl?" Martha asked softly as she ran her hands along Belle's neck. The hover horse's mechanical parts were warm to the touch and vibrating with energy that seemed to come from an external source rather than Belle's. Internal power systems. Ayanna stirred in his transport pod and managed to activate his translation device with obvious effort. "We are close," the device said, interpreting the alien's weak voice. "My people know we are coming. Your creature feels their presence." Martha looked around at the stark landscape that surrounded them on all sides. There was no sign of any settlement or even any indication that intelligent beings had ever passed through this remote region. But Belle's enhanced senses were clearly detecting something that suggested they were not as alone as they appeared to be. "How much farther?" Martha asked as she helped Ayanna take some water and the medication that Dr. Morgan had provided for the journey. "Before the sun reaches its highest point, we will arrive at the hidden valley where my people gather during the season of storms," Ayanna replied through his translator. "You will see things there that few humans have witnessed. My people are very careful about revealing themselves to outsiders." As the morning sun began to illuminate the twisted landscape around them, Belle started moving again with renewed purpose. The hover horse followed what appeared to be a natural path between the rock formations. But Martha noticed that the trail showed subtle signs of use by intelligent beings. Stones had been carefully arranged to mark the way, while certain rock faces showed symbols that might have been trail markers or warnings. About an hour after sunrise, they reached what appeared to be a dead end, where the path terminated at the base of a massive cliff wall. Belle stopped, and her humming grew even more intense as her sensors focused on something ahead of them. Martha was about to check her navigation equipment when a section of the cliff face simply vanished, revealing an opening large enough for Belle to pass through. "Camouflage technology," Ayanna explained weakly as they approached the hidden entrance. "My people learned long ago to hide our settlements from those who would do us harm. The devices that create these illusions are very old and very powerful." Belle stepped through the opening and Martha gasped at what she saw on the other side. The hidden valley was a green paradise nestled between towering cliffs that reached toward the sky, like the walls of a natural cathedral. Water cascaded down from hidden springs while strange plants grew in carefully tended gardens that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural landscape. But what truly took Martha's breath away were the creatures that moved through the valley like living dreams. Dozens of animals that looked like Belle but were clearly wild and unmodified, grazed in the meadows or rested in the shade of unusual trees. These were the original hover horses, the species that had inspired the creation of the biomechanical versions that humans used for transportation. The wild hover horses were larger and more graceful than their modified cousins, with coats that shimmered with natural bioluminescence. Their movements showed an intelligence and awareness that suggested they were more than simple animals. As Belle entered the valley, several of the wild creatures approached with obvious curiosity but no fear. "They remember," Ayana said through his translator. "Your creature carries the essence of their kind even though she has been changed by human science. They welcome her as family." Navak dwellings were scattered throughout the valley, structures that seemed to grow from the living rock rather than being built upon it. The architecture followed organic curves and flowing lines that made the buildings appear to be part of the natural environment. Martha could see Navak people moving among the structures, their bronze skin and geometric patterns making them almost invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. As Belle carried them deeper into the valley, more Navak emerged from their concealment to observe the unusual visitors. Martha felt the weight of many eyes upon her but sensed curiosity rather than hostility from the gathered aliens. Word of their arrival seemed to spread quickly through some form of communication that Martha could not detect. An elderly Navak approached as Belle finally stopped beside one of the larger structures. This individual was clearly ancient even by alien standards, with patterns on his skin that had faded to silver with age and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. He spoke in the musical Navak language, and Ayana's translator converted his words. "Elder Kaya welcomes the human friend who carries the dying sun home to his people," the device said. "He says that your action brings honor to both our species and opens a door that has been closed for too long." Martha dismounted from Belle and helped the Navak carefully transfer Ayana from the transport pod to a more comfortable resting place. The injured alien was clearly near the end of his strength, but he seemed to gain peace from being surrounded by his own people once again. "Thank you, Martha Collins," Ayana whispered through his translator. "You have given me the gift of dying among those who remember my name. This kindness will not be forgotten." Elder Kaya spoke again, and the translation device provided his words. "The human has shown great honor in bringing our son home. Such kindness deserves recognition and reward. We wish to offer a gift that shows our gratitude." Martha shook her head politely. "I don't need any reward. I was glad to help." "Nevertheless," the elder continued through the translator, "a gift freely given should be freely received. We offer you a choice of the wild ones, the original children of this world who have never known the touch of human modification." Martha looked at the magnificent creatures grazing in the meadows around them and felt her heart skip. The wild hover horses were beautiful beyond description, but they also represented something that seemed almost too precious to accept. These animals were clearly sacred to the Navak people and had been protected by them for countless generations. "I can't accept such a valuable gift," Martha protested. "These creatures belong here with your people." Elder Kaya smiled, an expression that translated clearly across species barriers. "The wild ones choose their own paths, human friend. They cannot be given as property because they are not property, but one among them has shown interest in your creature and in you. If she chooses to follow when you depart, that will be her decision to make." As if summoned by the elder's words, one of the wild hover horses approached Belle with obvious interest. This creature was slightly smaller than the others but moved with a grace and intelligence that was almost hypnotic. Her coat shimmered with patterns of blue and silver that seemed to shift like liquid. Starlight Belle and the wild hover horse touched noses in a greeting that seemed to convey more communication than Martha had thought possible between animals. The wild creature then approached Martha directly and studied her with large, intelligent eyes that seemed to look directly into her soul. "Her name translates roughly as Star Runner," Elder Kaya explained. "She has lived free in these valleys for many years, but she has always been curious about the world beyond our hidden places. Your arrival seems to have awakened something in her that was waiting for the right moment to emerge." Martha reached out tentatively, and Star Runner allowed her to touch the magnificent creature's neck. The contact sent a mild electric sensation up Martha's arm, as Star Runner's natural bioluminescence responded to human touch. It was clear that this was no ordinary animal, but a being with its own thoughts and desires. "The choice is yours, Star Runner," Martha said softly, speaking directly to the wild hover horse. "I would be honored to have you as a companion, but only if that's what you truly want." Star Runner stepped back and looked around the valley that had been her home for so long. Then she looked at Belle, who seemed to be encouraging her wild cousin to make the choice that felt right. Finally, Star Runner moved to stand beside Martha in a gesture that clearly indicated her decision. Elder Kaya nodded with satisfaction. It is decided then. Star Runner chooses the path that leads beyond our hidden valley. This too is a sign that the time has come for our Navak peoples to know each other better. As preparations were made for Martha's departure, other Marthas returned to Haven with Star Runner, created a sensation that spread throughout the settlement within hours. Word of her journey to the hidden Navak Valley and her return with a wild hover horse had reached the colony before she even arrived. People lined the main street to catch a glimpse of the magnificent creature that ran alongside Belle with fluid grace, that made the modified hover horses look clumsy by comparison. Jake was waiting at the ranch when Martha finally arrived home, his face showing a mixture of relief at her safe return and amazement at the sight of Star Runner. The wild hover horse moved with an otherworldly beauty that seemed to make the very air around her shimmer with possibilities. "She's incredible," Jake said as he watched Star Runner explore the ranch with obvious curiosity. "I've never seen anything move like that. The Navak call her Star Runner," Martha explained as she unsaddled Belle and began the process of caring for both animals after the long journey. "She chose to come with us. The Navak elder said it was a sign that the time had come for our peoples to know each other better." Before Martha could finish settling the animals, a convoy of vehicles arrived from Haven carrying officials who wanted to hear about her journey firsthand. Security Chief Paul Henderson led the group, accompanied by Dr. Morgan and several people that Martha did not recognize. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to concern as they observed Star Runner moving around the ranch. "Martha, we need to talk about what happened out there," Paul said with the tone of someone who was trying to remain calm despite significant stress. "Word of your journey has reached the corporate offices and they're sending a team of specialists to investigate the situation." Dr. Morgan approached Star Runner with the cautious movements of someone who was both fascinated and concerned. "This creature is definitely not the same species as our modified hover horses. The bioluminescence alone suggests capabilities that we don't understand." One of the strangers stepped forward and introduced himself as Dr. Carl Baker, a xenobiologist from the capital city who specialized in alien life forms. He had been flown in specifically to examine Star Runner and gather information about the Navak settlement that Martha had visited. "Mrs. Collins, what you've accomplished is remarkable from a diplomatic standpoint," Dr. Baker said as he began setting up monitoring equipment. "But we need to understand the scientific implications of what you've discovered. These wild hover horses could represent an evolutionary link that we've been missing in our understanding of this planet's ecosystem." Star Runner seemed to tolerate the scientific attention, but Martha could tell that the wild creature was becoming uncomfortable with all the strange people and equipment. Belle moved protectively closer to her wild cousin, creating a barrier between Star Runner and the scientists who wanted to study her. "She's not a laboratory specimen," Martha said firmly. "She chose to come here of her own free will, and she can leave any time she wants to." Dr. Baker nodded but continued setting up his instruments. "Of course, we're not suggesting that we treat her as property, but the opportunity to study a wild hover horse could provide insights that benefit both species. For instance, did you know that these creatures have electromagnetic sensing capabilities that are far more advanced than anything we've been able to reproduce in the modified versions?" Jake moved to stand beside Star Runner, placing a calming hand on her neck as the scientists continued their preparations. "What kind of capabilities are you talking about? Enhanced navigation, threat detection, communication with other members of their species across vast distances," Dr. Baker explained as he activated a scanner that began analyzing Star Runner's biological signatures. "The readings I'm getting suggest that these creatures are far more intelligent than we ever suspected. They may actually be semi-sentient beings rather than simple animals." The implications of Dr. Baker's words hit Martha like a physical blow. If the wild hover horses were truly intelligent beings, then the human practice of modifying them for transportation and labor took on a very different moral dimension. The colonists had been treating thinking creatures as property without ever realizing what they were doing. The Navak have been protecting these creatures for generations, Martha said quietly. They probably knew all along that the hover horses were more than animals. Dr. Morgan looked up from her own scanner with an expression of growing amazement. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. Star Runner is apparently in constant communication with something. but the signal patterns are unlike anything in our databases. As if responding to the doctor's words, Star Runner suddenly raised her head and focused her attention on the horizon. Belle immediately moved to join her, both creatures staring intently toward the east where storm clouds were beginning to gather. Their mechanical and biological components began glowing more brightly as they seemed to receive some kind of signal from a distant source. "They're responding to something," Dr. Baker said as he watched his instruments register unprecedented activity levels. "The electromagnetic patterns suggest they're receiving a complex communication signal from somewhere beyond our scanning range." Martha felt a chill of premonition as she remembered Ayana's warnings about the machines that had attacked him. The dying alien had spoken of destroyers that consumed worlds and left nothing behind but dust and metal. If Star Runner was receiving some kind of warning signal, it might mean that the threat was closer than anyone had realized. "Can you determine where the signal is coming from?" Martha asked urgently. Dr. Baker worked frantically with his equipment while both hover horses continued to display signs of increasing agitation. "The source appears to be moving, approaching from the eastern territories at high speed. Whatever is generating this signal, it's big and it's getting closer." Paul Henderson immediately activated his emergency communicator and began coordinating with the security forces back in Haven. "All units, we have a potential threat approaching from the east. Unknown contact, possibly airborne, estimated arrival time unknown." Star Runner suddenly broke away from the group and began running toward the eastern edge of the ranch property. Belle followed without hesitation, both creatures moving with urgent purpose that suggested they were responding to an immediate danger. Martha grabbed a pair of binoculars and tried to see what had alarmed the animals. In the distance, she could make out dark shapes moving against the storm clouds. At first, she thought they might be aircraft from one of the mining operations, but as they came closer, it became clear that these were not human vehicles. The objects moved with a mechanical precision that was unlike anything built by human or Navak technology. "Those are the machines that Ayana described," Martha said with growing alarm. "The destroyers that attacked him in the wilderness." Dr. Baker's instruments were now registering massive electromagnetic disturbances as the approaching objects came within scanning range. "These readings don't match any known technology. The power signatures are enormous and the flight patterns suggest autonomous operation." The machines were now close enough to see clearly, and Martha felt her blood turn cold as she observed their alien design. They were roughly cylindrical in shape, but covered with appendages that moved constantly like mechanical tentacles. Their surfaces reflected light in unnatural ways that hurt to look at directly. "Everyone needs to get to shelter immediately," Paul Henderson ordered, as he realized the magnitude of the threat they were facing. "These things are heading straight for us." Star Runner and Belle returned from their reconnaissance mission, both creatures showing signs of extreme distress. Star Runner approached Martha directly and seemed to be trying to communicate something urgent through body language that transcended species barriers. "She's trying to tell us something," Jake observed as he watched the wild hover horse's behavior. "I think she wants us to follow her." Dr. Baker looked at his instruments one more time before beginning to pack his equipment. The creatures seem to have some kind of advanced knowledge about these machines. Maybe they know how to avoid them or find protection. Martha made a decision that felt both desperate and necessary. "Everyone who wants to survive this needs to get on a hover horse and follow Star Runner. She knows things about this planet that we don't understand." As the alien machines drew closer, their presence began affecting all the electronic equipment in the area. Vehicles shut down, communication devices failed, and even Belle's mechanical components began showing signs of interference. Only Star Runner seemed unaffected by whatever energy field the machines were projecting. "This is exactly what Ayana warned us about," Martha said, as she helped Jake climb onto Belle's saddle. "These machines don't just attack individuals. They're here to destroy everything living on New Arizona." Paul Henderson was trying unsuccessfully to contact Haven on his radio when the first of the alien machines passed directly overhead. The device emitted a sound like metallic screaming that made everyone cover their ears in pain. Where its shadow fell, the vegetation began to wither and die as if exposed to some form of radiation. Star Runner began moving toward the western canyons with Belle following close behind. The other humans had no choice but to follow. Star Runner led the fleeing humans through canyon passages that seemed impossibly narrow for the group to navigate. But the wild hoverhorse moved with absolute confidence through terrain that would have been impassable without her guidance. Behind them, the alien machines continued their systematic destruction of the landscape, leaving behind smoking craters where Martha's ranch and the surrounding homesteads had once stood. The group included Martha, Jake, Dr. Baker, Dr. Morgan, Paul Henderson, and 3 security officers who had managed to reach the ranch before the attack began. Their electronic equipment was completely useless due to the electromagnetic interference from the alien machines, leaving them dependent on Star Runner's knowledge of the hidden paths through the wilderness. After 2 hours of desperate travel, Star Runner finally stopped at what appeared to be another dead end in the canyon system. Belle moved alongside her wild cousin, and both creatures began emitting electromagnetic signals that caused the rock face to shimmer and reveal another hidden entrance to Navak territory. "They're taking us back to the hidden valley," Martha realized as they passed through the camouflaged opening. The Navak must have some kind of protection against these machines. The valley looked different from Martha's previous visit, with defensive preparations clearly visible throughout the settlement. Navak warriors moved with purpose between installations that combined organic architecture with technology that seemed to bend light and energy in impossible ways. The wild hoverhorses that grazed peacefully during Martha's first visit were now arranged in defensive formations that suggested they played an active role in the settlement's protection. Elder Kahia approached the group with an escort of younger Navak warriors, his ancient face showing a mixture of welcome and grim determination. Through a translation device similar to the one Ayana had carried, he addressed the human refugees directly. "Welcome, friends of the dying sun," the elder said through the translator. "We have been expecting your arrival since the destroyers began their attack on your settlement. Our watchers in the outer territories brought word of the machine's approach." Dr. Baker stepped forward with obvious excitement despite their desperate circumstances. "Elder, we need to understand what we're facing. These machines are unlike anything in our technological databases. The destroyers are not from this world or any world that knows life," Elder Kaya replied. "They come from the spaces between stars where only metal and hunger exist. My people have fought them before in other places and other times. They consume everything that lives and leave behind only emptiness." Paul Henderson activated his emergency protocols despite the fact that his communication equipment was not functioning. "How many of our people escaped the attack? Do we know the status of Haven?" A younger Navak warrior approached and spoke in the musical language of his people. The elder's expression grew even more grave as he received the report. "Your settlement fights bravely, but the destroyers are many and your weapons cannot harm them. Without help, your people will not survive the night." The magnitude of the disaster was beginning to sink in for the human refugees. Haven represented 50 years of human effort on New Arizona, and its destruction would mean the end of human presence on the planet. 3,000 colonists were fighting for their lives against an enemy they could not understand or effectively resist. "What can we do?" Martha asked, speaking for the entire group. Ayana said that humans and Navak working together might be able to stand against this threat. Elder Kaya gestured toward the defensive installations that were visible throughout the valley. "Our ancestors learned to fight the destroyers during the Great War that ended 10,000 years ago. We have weapons and knowledge that can harm them, but we are few while they are many. Your people have courage and numbers but lack the tools needed for this battle." Dr. Morgan examined the Navak defensive technology with obvious fascination. "These energy shields and weapon systems are far beyond our current capabilities. But if you're willing to share the technology, our engineers might be able to adapt it for human use." "The sharing of knowledge requires trust," Elder Kaya replied. "Trust that was begun by the kindness shown to our dying son. The human Martha Collins proved that your people are capable of honor. Now we must discover whether that honor extends to your leaders and your warriors." Jake had been observing the interaction between Star Runner and the other wild hover horses with growing understanding. "The animals are part of your defense system, aren't they? They're not just transportation or companions." The elder smiled at Jake's perceptiveness. "The children of the wind are partners in all things, including war. They carry our warriors and provide capabilities that technology alone cannot match. Your modified versions have lost much of their original nature, but they remember enough to be useful in the coming battle." Dr. Baker was studying readouts from the few instruments that still functioned in the electromagnetic environment of the Navak settlement. The wild hover horses are generating some kind of interference field that protects against the machine's weapons. If we could understand how that works, we might be able to protect our own people. A new group of Navak arrived in the valley, carrying wounded members of their species who had been injured in encounters with the alien machines. The injuries were similar to those that had nearly killed Ayana, confirming that the destroyers posed an equal threat to both humans and Navak. "The destroyers have found our outer settlements," Elder Kaya explained as the wounded were carried to treatment centers. "They learn our hiding places and adapt their attacks to overcome our defenses. This is why the Great War lasted so long and cost so many lives." Martha watched the Navak tending to their wounded and realized that both species were facing extinction if they could not find a way to work together effectively. "What do you need from us? How can humans help in this fight?" "Your people have skills with technology that complement our knowledge of the destroyers," the elder replied. "Together we might create weapons and defenses that neither species could develop alone. But this will require trust and cooperation at levels that have never existed between our peoples." Paul Henderson had been silent during most of the conversation, but now he stepped forward with the authority of someone who had made a difficult decision. "I can't speak for the entire human colony, but I can speak for the people here. We're willing to do whatever is necessary to protect both our species from this threat." The negotiations that followed moved with surprising speed as both sides realized that time was running out for Haven and its 3,000 inhabitants. Navak weapons specialists demonstrated energy weapons that could penetrate the destroyer's defenses, while human engineers suggested modifications that would allow the weapons to be mass-produced quickly. Star Runner and Bell played crucial roles in the planning sessions, serving as living examples of how the two species might integrate their technologies and capabilities. The wild hover horses possessed natural abilities that the modified versions had lost, but the mechanical enhancements developed by humans provided advantages that the wild creatures lacked. As plans took shape for a combined assault on the machines threatening Haven, Martha found herself serving as an unofficial ambassador between the two species. Her act of kindness toward Ayana had opened the door to cooperation, but maintaining that cooperation required constant effort and understanding from both sides. "The destroyers expect each species to fight alone," Elder Kahya observed as the battle preparations neared completion. "They have faced humans and Navak separately in the past and learned to counter our individual capabilities. But they have never faced us working together. This may give us the advantage we need to drive them from this world." The combined force that assembled in the Hidden Valley represented something unprecedented in the history of both species. Navak warriors mounted on wild hover horses worked alongside human soldiers, riding modified versions enhanced with Navak technology. The weapon systems combined human engineering with Navak energy manipulation in ways that created capabilities neither species could have achieved alone. As they prepared to depart for the battle that would determine the fate of New Arizona, Martha looked around at the alliance that had grown from her simple decision to help a dying stranger. Ayana's prediction was coming true, but the cost of building trust between species was being measured in the lives of both humans and Navak, who were fighting for their survival against an enemy that sought to destroy all life on the planet. The battle for Haven began at dawn with a coordinated assault that caught the alien machines completely unprepared for the combined capabilities of humans and Navak fighting together. Star Runner led the charge alongside Bell, their enhanced abilities allowing them to navigate through the destroyer's energy fields while carrying warriors armed with hybrid weapons that combined human engineering with Navak energy manipulation. Martha rode Bell into combat beside Jake, who had insisted on joining the battle despite his mother's concerns about his safety. The young man had proven remarkably skilled at working with both human and Navak technology, making him valuable to the combined forces. Behind them, Navak warriors on wild hover horses moved like liquid, lightning through the destroyer formations, while human soldiers provided covering fire with weapons that could actually damage the alien machines. The destroyers had been systematically consuming Haven when the Alliance forces arrived, their mechanical tentacles tearing apart buildings and equipment, while energy beams sterilized anything that showed signs of life. The alien machines moved with the relentless efficiency of a cosmic plague, converting matter into their own mechanical components while spreading their influence across the landscape. But the combined assault disrupted their pattern of destruction in ways they had not anticipated. The wild hover horses could sense the destroyer's electromagnetic signatures and predict their movements, while the modified versions provided the speed and endurance needed to maintain sustained combat operations. Human tactical thinking combined with Navak knowledge of destroyer weaknesses created battle plans that exploited vulnerabilities neither species could have discovered alone. The tide of battle turned when Dr. Baker and a team of Navak technicians succeeded in activating a resonance frequency that disrupted the destroyer's ability to coordinate their attacks. The alien machines began moving independently rather than as a unified swarm, making them vulnerable to the superior tactics and adaptability of the Alliance forces. By midday, the last of the destroyers had been driven from Haven's immediate vicinity, though scattered machines continued to operate in the outer territories. The settlement had suffered significant damage, but the majority of its 3,000 inhabitants had survived by taking shelter in underground facilities that the destroyers had not been able to penetrate completely. Paul Henderson emerged from the command bunker to survey the devastation and coordinate the relief efforts. Nearly half of Haven's buildings had been destroyed or damaged, but the critical infrastructure, including the medical facilities, communication systems, and manufacturing capabilities, remained largely intact. More importantly, the successful defense had proven that humans and Navak could work together effectively when their survival depended on cooperation. The destroyers will return, Elder Kaya warned as the immediate celebration of victory gave way to the sobering reality of their situation. This attack was only the beginning. They will adapt their tactics and return with greater numbers unless we can find their source and eliminate it. Dr. Morgan had established a field hospital that treated both human and Navak wounded, marking the first time that medical knowledge had been shared between the species. The collaboration had already led to breakthrough treatments that benefited both groups, demonstrating the practical value of the Alliance beyond its military applications. We've learned more about Navak physiology in the past day than in 50 years of separate development, Dr. Morgan reported to the Combined Leadership Council. Their healing techniques are remarkably effective for human injuries, while our surgical procedures can help with trauma that their methods cannot address. The reconstruction of Haven proceeded with unprecedented cooperation between human and Navak engineers. Buildings were designed to incorporate both species' architectural philosophies, creating structures that were more efficient and better adapted to New Arizona's challenging environment. The wild hover horses worked alongside construction equipment, their natural abilities complementing human technology in ways that accelerated the rebuilding process. Martha found herself appointed as the official liaison between human and Navak leadership, a role that grew naturally from her initial act of kindness toward Ayana. The dying alien sacrifice had not been in vain, as his prediction about the Alliance had proven accurate in ways that exceeded even his hopes. 6 months after the battle, Haven had been transformed into something that neither species could have created alone. The settlement had expanded into a true city that accommodated both human and Navak families, with shared facilities that served the needs of both groups. The integration had not been without challenges, but the mutual respect that grew from their shared struggle against the destroyers provided a foundation for overcoming cultural differences. Jake had emerged as a leader among the younger generation of both species, his natural empathy and technical skills making him an effective bridge between human and Navak perspectives. He had established a training program that taught humans to work with wild hover horses, while helping Navak understand human technology and methods. Star Runner had become the symbol of the Alliance, her choice to leave the hidden valley representing the possibility of cooperation between species that had previously avoided contact. She had bonded with both Martha and Belle in ways that created a family unit spanning the gap between wild and modified, human and Navak. The threat of the destroyers remained, but the Alliance had proven capable of defending their shared world against the mechanical plague. Scout teams composed of both humans and Navak searched the outer territories for signs of destroyer activity while researchers worked to understand the alien machine's origins and weaknesses. Martha's ranch had been rebuilt as a training center where humans learned to work with wild hover horses while Navak studied human agricultural techniques. The cooperation had led to agricultural innovations that increased food production for both species while reducing the environmental impact of farming on New Arizona's delicate ecosystem. The success of the alliance on New Arizona had attracted attention from other human colonies that were facing their own challenges with hostile alien species or environmental threats. Diplomatic missions had been dispatched to share the lessons learned from the human-Navac cooperation, spreading the model of interspecies partnership to other worlds. What we've accomplished here proves that cooperation is stronger than conflict, Martha observed during a ceremony marking the first anniversary of the alliance. My decision to help Ayana was just one small act of kindness, but it opened the door to possibilities that none of us could have imagined. Elder Kaya had established a permanent residence in the expanded settlement, serving as the senior Navac representative to the alliance government. His presence provided continuity and wisdom that helped guide the partnership through its early challenges and growing pains. The human Martha Collins gave up her most precious possession to help a dying stranger, the elder said through his translator during the anniversary ceremony. That act of sacrifice became the seed from which trust grew between our peoples. We honor her courage and generosity by continuing to build the future that her kindness made possible. As the ceremony concluded with a demonstration of combined human and Navac capabilities, Martha stood with Jake and Starrunner watching the sunset over their transformed world. The red sky that had once seemed harsh and forbidding now appeared, beautiful and full of promise for the generations that would inherit the alliance between species. The destroyers continued to probe the defenses of New Arizona, but each attack was met by forces that grew stronger through cooperation and shared knowledge. The mechanical plague that had consumed countless worlds had finally encountered something it could not overcome. The simple but powerful force of two species choosing to work together rather than fight alone. Martha's simple act of giving her only horse to a dying Apache had indeed led to the return of wild Mustangs, but in ways that exceeded any expectation. The gift had multiplied beyond her wildest dreams, bringing not just Starrunner but an entire herd of possibilities that transformed two civilizations. Word of New Arizona's success spread throughout human space like wildfire, inspiring colonies on dozens of worlds to seek peaceful contact with indigenous species, rather than viewing them as obstacles to overcome. The model of cooperation that had emerged from Martha's kindness became a template for human expansion that emphasized partnership rather than conquest. The wild hover horses had begun breeding with their modified cousins, creating a new generation of creatures that combined the best qualities of both lineages. These hybrid animals possessed enhanced intelligence and natural abilities while retaining the mechanical modifications that made them useful. Partners in building civilization on frontier worlds. Corporate mining operations that had once strip-mined sacred sites without regard for indigenous peoples found themselves facing unified resistance from human-alien alliances. The same cooperation that had defeated the destroyers proved equally effective at protecting planetary ecosystems from exploitation and destruction.